In this video, we will talk about why 2025 is set to be an amazing year for crypto and which crypto categories are looking amazing in terms of potential. If you don't know who I am, I'm Robin. I've mentored over 1,000 investors in crypto and helped them to scale from $10,000 to $100,000 and from $100,000 to $1 million. So let's get into this. So we will cover three important things. We will start with the crypto-specific environment, then we will talk a bit about macro, which is also important for the overall crypto bull run, and then lastly we will cover the areas in crypto where we at Crypto Game Plan think that there is some potential and it should definitely be a place where you do some research in the future. So let's get into this. So here we have a lot of topics we can talk about. So first of all, obviously, that Bitcoin could be a strategic asset in the future of the US and other central banks. Of course, there's no law that says, okay, we can add Bitcoin now as a strategic asset to our treasury, but people like, for example, Trump, were pretty bullish about it. So let's get directly into this. So the US, like this is an article, the US plans to invest 76 billion US dollars to invest them into Bitcoin over the next 5 years, positioning it as a long-term hedge against inflation and economic instability. And if we look at the current development, like we see that inflation will continue to rise. And of course, like looking at the past price performance of Bitcoin makes sense to add it as such an asset. But of course, there is like a lot to do when we want to see Bitcoin as a strategic asset. But alone, like the fact alone that the US government is thinking about this creates a prisoner dilemma, which I personally find interesting, because if we look at the general world, we already see other central banks talking about adding Bitcoin as a strategic asset or thinking about it. And for example, we have Brazil, we have Russia, we have some people in Germany talking about it. We have people all around the world talking about it. So this basically creates this prisoner dilemma, which is why I say that the chances are really high that we might not see the Federal Reserve or that the central bank of the US will start allowing to hold Bitcoin as a strategic asset. But other central banks could make like the first move in that direction. And one of the simple reasons is that like if the US starts buying Bitcoin as a strategic asset, this would lead to a huge demand for Bitcoins, meaning that if a central bank, like another central bank, is starting to adopt Bitcoin after the US, that they will have to buy Bitcoin for extreme high prices. Now, as a central bank right now, you think about, okay, what should we do? Should we get into Bitcoin before the US is doing it, or should we do it afterwards? Which route do we go? And this basically, like this environment creates like a similar environment to the prisoner dilemma. So if we quickly look at what the prisoner dilemma is. So the prisoner dilemma is basically like when you have two prisoners, and if like both prisoners confess, both would have to sit in the prison for 5 years. Now, if one remains silent, the other can go, but the one prisoner who remains silent has to stay in the prison for 20 years. Now, the other way around as well. And if both remain silent, they will only stay in this, will only stay for 1 year. Now the question is, what do you do? Like, do you confess, or do you gamble on that the other prisoner is not talking? Because those prisoners cannot interact with each other. So, and this basically creates a similar image or similar environment to what currently happens with those central banks. So if central bank A adopts Bitcoin and central bank B doesn't adopt Bitcoin as a strategic asset, central bank A gains the first mover advantage and central bank B has to buy Bitcoin for much higher prices. Now the other way around, and if both are not buying Bitcoin as a strategic asset, nothing is changing. But if both start to buy Bitcoin, this is a win-win situation for Bitcoin because the price will accelerate a lot. And you see that if you look at like those four opportunities, those four opportunities, that 3 of them mean that the Bitcoin price will go up, that one central bank at least will buy Bitcoin. Now, looking at the whole world population and all the central banks out there, we already see moves in that direction. And For me as an investor, this is just like an environment where also people it's not just me seeing that, it's also big companies seeing this and starting to say, okay, no matter which central bank will buy Bitcoin at one point, this will create a huge demand when it comes to the Bitcoin price. Now, even from retail investors and institutional investors, the central banks don't even have to buy Bitcoin as a strategic asset, but the fact that they are speaking about it, the idea alone creates a narrative. And you already see predictions that a lot of institutions will now start purchasing Bitcoin. So this is definitely something that will lead to price increases and will lead to further people buying into Bitcoin just because of the idea alone. I've made an investment call in the Crypto Game Plan program where we talked about the potential price effects if the US is doing what they were saying that they want to do, or what Trump said that he wants to do with the Bitcoin strategic, how much he wanted to purchase. This alone, his plans would have led to a 20% increase just through the buying of the central bank in the US alone. And now you can predict, okay, what will happen to the overall price of Bitcoin if not just the central bank in the US is buying Bitcoin, but also all the central banks around the world will start buying Bitcoin. All right. Now, of course, this is just an idea, but this idea alone, as I said, creates a narrative. Now, institutions are likely to go into or bet on that narrative because as an institution right now, you don't face that many regulatory hazards when it comes to purchasing Bitcoin, especially in the US when you have all of those ETF options and you can also buy it via self-custody. So it makes sense for them to front run this trade, and front running this trade and being right about it will pay extremely well. And looking at the current government or current political environment in the US, we also see that we have not just Trump who's pro-crypto, we have all sorts of other people placed in the government already who are extremely bullish or extremely pro-crypto. We have David Sachs who's pro-crypto, we have Elon Musk, of course, who's pro-crypto, we have Vivek who's pro-crypto, we have Vance who's pro-crypto. And for example, Vivek was already involved, and David Sachs as well, in a couple of crypto projects. So they are obviously pro-crypto, meaning that we will see political pressure in terms of, okay, people want to purchase, people who sit in the government will push the government to at least create a better regulatory framework for crypto. So we have the central bank narrative, which will be active throughout the whole of 2025. And we have the regulatory change that will lead to better regulations for crypto, which will then also lead to a narrative, which is basically when we look back in time, which could be pretty similar to the Telecommunications Act of 1996. Now, what was the Telecommunications Act of 1996? It was basically a new regulatory framework for internet companies, to make it very simple. And before that, internet companies were seen like normal telecommunication companies. So there was no differentiation between an internet company, which works completely different, to a telephone company. So the regulatory framework back then was that both of those types have been seen as one. And after this act, they have seen as two different things. And again, if we look at the price development of the Nasdaq after those new regulations for those internet companies, we have not just seen a huge increase in price for those internet companies, but also what we have seen is that we had an Amazon IPO, that we have an eBay IPO, all of those, or Yahoo IPO, all of those companies who created consumer apps and stuff that people still use till today. So before that, we also had interesting companies launching browsers and stuff like this, but the real consumer applications have been found after the new regulatory framework. And this is also something that I personally think could happen, because if we see a better regulatory framework, what will happen is that people or founders who currently stayed away from crypto because the regulatory framework was pretty bad, and they don't wanted to like have this headache when they found a company. Now those people, if the regulatory framework is changing, they can definitely, like they will have a better environment to found a company in. Now, this is the crypto specific environment. Of course, there are many more developments in this space. We have DeSci, which is currently in its early shoes, where maybe something crazy could happen in the future where like crypto projects like solve real world problems. But mostly I would say those are the key drivers that will lead to institutions buying Bitcoin and pumping up the crypto prices. Of course, we will also see macro developments, or we are already seeing macro developments, which could lead to a huge price increase, or at least a risk-on environment for investors to buy like risky assets like stocks and, for example, crypto. And the concept I'm referring to is the global liquidity cycle. Now, again, I don't want to dive too deep into it. Just understand that when we look at this chart right here, for example, that if this chart is up here, this basically means that we have a lot of money in the economy, and if we go down here, that there's not that much money in the economy. So a lot of money means that we have a high inflation. So and that basically risky assets which benefit of high inflation and a lot of supply when it comes to money, those assets usually prosper throughout those times. And we also see that when we look at the history of the S&P 500. So if you look at the price increases and decreases, or the bubbles, basically the bursts of the bubbles, you also see that this is highly correlated with the liquidity cycles. Now, basically we are again at the blink of a liquidity injection, meaning that new money is entering the system. And for example, we see that in China. Like China is starting to like inject liquidity again into the economy because they are struggling. So they will pump up the economy once again by printing money and putting it into the economy. And naturally, risky assets will prosper through that. So investors will hedge their wealth against the newly created money supply. And those assets which are naturally like perfect for that are stocks and right now also crypto. So another thing that will lead to more money entering the system are the lower interest rates from the US. So this is a bit complicated, but basically the interest rates dictate how expensive money is. And if the interest rates are low, banks can purchase money via loans for very low prices. So they don't have to pay a lot of interest fee to the central bank for taking out loans and then loaning that money to companies once again. And companies use that money to grow, which will then lead to like more capital, which is in the economy, aka stocks will go up. And when stocks go up, people have more money, people feel more confident in the riskier assets once again. So we have like two like drivers of the overall liquidity. And I would say, like, if we also look at the plans of Donald Trump, like he wants to print absurd amounts of money once again, which will then lead once again to price increases and higher liquidity in the overall market. Meaning that the liquidity cycle, that what we like currently can see is that we once again start to get in this upward movement, which could, like, looking at the current market of crypto, this could lead to a crazy bull run throughout 2025. And there's, again, just one macro environment or one macro indicator where I would say, okay, this looks extremely bullish. There are also other like cycles in the macro environment which are like pro risk assets. So we have a lot of things speaking for crypto. And now we are looking at the things that are looking very interesting or areas in crypto that look very interesting in 2025. So as you already saw, when we look at the Telecommunications Act, after the Telecommunications Act, there were companies got created or did an IPO, which were heavily consumer focused. So it wasn't a browser company, it wasn't like a new techie thing in the background, it was something that consumers actually used. And this is also one thing that I think will happen in the coming weeks and months after the regulations are more favorable for crypto. As a researcher, as an investor in crypto, you want to look out for those things. You want to look out for things that actually deliver some sort of value to the end user. And when you think back where Amazon started, like no one believed that Amazon could be what it is today. Back then, everyone was running to the bookstores to buy their books. Then Amazon got created. Some people bought it. Some people believed in the idea of Amazon. But overall, like the amount of people believed in Amazon and what it could be in the future, like the amount of people was very small. So back then, not everyone could see the vision. And the same was also true for eBay and all of the other companies. So if you're looking into that sector right now, you have to be open-minded. Like what could happen in 15 years? Because now is the time where you can find those companies, where you can be early to those like IPOs. It's not an IPO in crypto, but to those TGEs or ICOs where you can invest into those companies. And right now, like we are slowly drifting into that environment where regulations favor crypto. Even if it's not happening right now in this bull run for 100%, we won't have like the perfect regulations till the end of the bull run, but we will see companies or founders who know that the regulatory framework for crypto in general will become better, which is why they will start creating companies in crypto which are built for like the long term and not what you usually see in crypto for speculation. So definitely something I would be very like, when you hear something which seems like a good consumer focused project and actually adds value, now is the time to like dive deep into those, in my opinion. Now, other things or other areas where I personally think which are going to be interesting are, for example, new ecosystems like Hype and Sui. So in every bull run, we see new projects or new layer ones that get created and attract a lot of buyers. Now, do they stay for the long term? No one knows. But throughout the bull run, they often offer interesting opportunities to invest in. So Hyperliquid, if you don't know it, it's basically a decentralized exchange where you can also trade futures, and it's just a very like good decentralized exchange. Now, this decentralized exchange is creating an environment where a lot of capital flows into that layer one, and other projects and coins can also launch on that layer one. Now, if you see, like in crypto, there's a saying like liquidity is king. So if you see a lot of liquidity flowing into one ecosystem, then you can say that all the projects inside of this ecosystem will benefit of that. And if you identify specific projects that are adding value to this ecosystem, then you can say, okay, those could be interesting. So as a researcher, I would definitely look at Hyperliquid. Then another area that I would look at is Sui. So Sui, you see that the total TVL increased over the past couple of months, and like extremely. So this is also stick to the price increase of Sui. So the TVL itself is not necessarily like the best metrics to look at. Better would be something like stable coins. And we see that we also have like a huge amount of stable coins on Sui. So when we look at Sui as an ecosystem, we again like think about, okay, what is Sui doing? And Sui right now tries to be like something like the new Solana, and maybe they get like a part of that market share. I'm not 100% sure about that. I'm a bit skeptical, but it's definitely a place where you can find opportunities, because when I was like investing into the DeFi space in the last bull run, even like areas like Avalanche, for example, a layer one where nothing really is happening nowadays, but back in the days, there were like tons of opportunities if you've been deep inside of into the ecosystem. So if you are like moving inside of this ecosystem, using all of those protocols and knowing all of the new fancy protocols, then you can definitely also make a lot of money over there. But you have to be careful. It's again, like this is a bit more complicated than the things I just talked about, but definitely also something I would check out if I would be you. Now, the next part will be, of course, AI agents. Like they went through the roof already, but I believe like in DeFi back in the days, in the beginning, we only had like decentralized exchanges. And what I believe will happen is that we will see mergers of AI agents with other areas. For example, DeSci. So decentralized science, for the ones who don't know what that means. So basically a way to conduct research inside of a decentralized autonomous organization. So you like research interesting topics. Okay, don't dive too deep into this, but basically AI agents are also still looking very interesting. And especially if they combine their use case or their category to another category. And I believe that there will be still like a lot of growth within this area. Still, but you also have to make sure like the AI agent space is extremely overheated right now. And yeah, I don't know if it's the best area to like directly go into, but it's still something I would not forget if I would plan my portfolio for the coming year. Now, another interesting place to look for opportunities is government-supported cryptocurrencies. Now, what do I mean by that? Or not government-supported cryptocurrencies, but like sort of government-supported cryptocurrencies, but also like products that are available for the new buyer, which will enter the market. And when I think about the new people who will enter crypto after the regulatory framework was getting better, then those people usually are like in their mid-40s, mid-50s, who always said, okay, crypto is nothing for me, it's too risky, and it's not regulated. Now, those people are not likely, like they won't buy cryptocurrencies like you're maybe buying them. So they will buy them via, for example, those grayscale trusts. So if you never have seen this website, you can find it under just searching for grayscale crypto products on Google, and then you will get to this website. So what are those trusts? Those trusts are basically like grayscale is buying the cryptocurrency, the real cryptocurrency for you, and you buy the trust. So you can basically invest into Aave without ever using stuff like Coinbase or so. Now, this is interesting because now this new people who will enter crypto, of course, they will look at Bitcoin, and of course, they will look at Ethereum, but they will also they also want more potential when it comes to their cryptocurrency investments. And those products or those trusts are a good place to look out for them. So you will find a lot of options over here. Of course, there's also some stuff like Mana. So I would never invest, for example, in Mana, just because it's not hyped anymore. And yeah, just looking at for example, the AUM, and just look at the things that have the highest AUM, you can also say those could be the place where the next new money or the next old money will flow into first. And again, I had a couple of quotes with some people who already invested into them, but most of them, they weren't educated enough to understand what is a good cryptocurrency and what is a bad one. This is also what you have to keep in mind. The education level of those new investors, what do they buy? And most of them will buy stuff which sounds trustable. And trust for them means something which is old. Because when you think about the S&P 500, for example, the old basically means that your project or that your company was alive for a long time. Now in crypto, of course, this is not meaning anything because you can't delete a cryptocurrency. So even old cryptocurrencies will stay alive forever. So if you look at crypto in 60 years and look at, for example, let's talk like Bitcoin Cash, for example, something that has Ethereum Classic, which has absolutely no use case whatsoever, like those currencies will still exist because you can't delete them. So the question is if you can buy them, like, but they will still be like, theoretically, they could still be available on the market. Now, those trusts are an interesting place to look out for like potential opportunities. Another place to look at is the World Liberty Finance address. So I will link the thing here. I will link the website underneath the video. You can also see where they invested in. And this is basically the DeFi project of Donald Trump. So also an interesting place to look out for like mid-risk cryptocurrencies. Because depending on your overall like risk appetite, you might not want to invest into AI agents where nothing is backing them. You might want to invest into mid-risk stuff, which looks a bit more safe. Now, this is also a place where you can look at, because if they are investing in it, this could mean that they might know something that you currently don't know. So with that being said, now you have a proper idea of interesting areas in crypto where you could go deeper into. You have ideas where you can look out for new opportunities. And as always, I won't give you names. I will give you ideas because I don't want you to buy just simply what I am buying. This is not how you will make money in crypto. Now, if you are looking to further educate yourself on a daily basis, I have my Telegram channel linked underneath the video, so I would highly recommend you to check it out, and also my website where you can check out what I'm offering. And with that being said, I wish you a pleasant day and see you in the next video.